for joining us today. We're really glad to be able to offer this kind of informal informational session for you guys. And I hope that you find a lot of value in it and you take away a little bit more knowledge than you came with. So just a brief introduction. My name is Kristen. I'm going to be your host for this evening. I am an international admissions officer here at Dalhousie. And again, very pleased to be with you to give you this information as you impart on your journey to Dalhousie. So before I hand the presentation over to our certified immigration advisors, I do just want to run through a few housekeeping items. First thing, we're really pleased to announce that we have some very talented translators here with us tonight. If you'd like to hear the presentation in Arabic or Mandarin, you can go to you can enable the translation feature by selecting your language channel of choice by clicking interpretation in webinar controls and clicking on the language that you want to hear. And just in case you missed that, I am going to post the directions for how to do that in our chat in a moment. We are having a little bit of difficulty with our Spanish translation, but hopefully we'll have that up and running for you guys at some point in the presentation, okay? So before we get to the end of the presentation, we are going to have some time at the end for question and answers. If you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A section rather than the chat section. We're going to try and reserve the chat function for any technical issues you might want to tell us about during the presentation, okay? So your questions should go in the Q&A section. There are going to be a fair number of people with us here tonight. We anticipate a few more joining us later on. And we're likely not going to be able to answer all of your questions. So we're going to try and choose the questions that apply most to the broadest number of people. Please do keep in mind that this is an immigration session and we're going to try and answer immigration questions only because this is a really valuable experience for students to be able to access our certified immigration advisors in this way. If you do have questions about your admission, you can reach out to the representative for your area at dal.ca/connect or to myself if you have any questions. My contact information is on my screen here. And thank you again for joining us tonight. I'm going to hand things over to our immigration advisors now to get us started.
Thank you, Kristen. Hello, everyone. Students from all over the world. Welcome to join our session this evening. My name is Qiuling Wu. I'm an international student advisor at the International Center. Also, as Kristen mentioned, I'm a certified immigration consultant. I'm here with two of my colleagues, Mark Mason from our agricultural campus in Truro, which is about an hour away from Halifax. And my other colleague, Zach, who is also an advisor here at the International Center on the Halifax campus. So today we're going to talk about study permit. So if we can have the next slide, Kristen, that'd be great. Yeah. So thank you. If you are visiting Canada, you know, some people may need a visa, some may need an ETA, some may need nothing, maybe just a passport, you know, in the case of the United States students, right? But if you are coming to Canada to study, there is no exception whatsoever. Everybody has to have a study permit in order to study in Canada. As I mentioned, you know, if you're from a country where a visa is required, you would get a visa along with study permit approval. If you're from a country where an electronic travel authorization or ETA is required, you'll be issued a study permit approval along with an ETA. And in the case of students from the United States, you only need a study permit. So you don't need a visa, you don't need an ETA, but a study permit is absolutely required. So next slide, I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Mark Mason. Next slide, please, Kristen.
Hello and welcome this evening. So as Qiuling mentioned, everybody needs a study permit, including those that are coming for 6 months or less. In the past, this wasn't necessary, but due to COVID, it's now required that if you want to come to Canada, even for a short period of time, you still are going to need a study permit, and you need to attend a DLI, that's Designated Learning Institute, that has a COVID readiness plan approved by the province or territory. So for example, Dalhousie is a designated learning institution, and we have a COVID readiness plan in place. So if you're coming to study in Nova Scotia, we are ready, and we have a plan all laid out. And Zach is going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. But basically, anyways, we'll leave that with Zach. Next slide.
Sorry, just one moment. Omar and April, can you guys unmute your mics? Omar, I see you've got yours unmuted. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, I just want to add something that Mark was saying. Your study permit allows you to not only study in Canada, but also give you the ability to work both on and off campus as well. So the timing, so when should you apply for a study permit? So we have learned over the past year, amidst the global pandemic. So the rule of thumb is to apply as early as possible, as soon as you can. So in other words, once you get accepted to Dalhousie, you have received your letter of acceptance, you can apply for the study permit right away. For your very first study permit, it has to be submitted from outside of Canada. And you cannot come to Canada before it has been approved, right? For students who are from a visa exempt country, or in other words, if you only need an ETA to travel to Canada, don't come before your study permit is approved. Because if you come to Canada, which is almost impossible during the pandemic, during the travel restrictions, right? Let's say pre-COVID, before the pandemic, if you came to Canada on a visa or ETA before your study permit is approved, it'll be problematic because you cannot start studying without a study permit approval. And you cannot get your study permit unless you go back to the border, go back to the port of entry. So in other words, you have to fly out of Canada and then coming back again, or go to the Canada-US border to receive your study permit. So the point here is wait until after your study permit has been approved before you plan to come to Canada. So given the processing times, the delay in processing times, the delay in providing your biometrics, or maybe your language test, maybe your police certificate, maybe your medical examinations. So I would recommend apply as early as possible. Of course, the processing times vary from country to country. So you have to check with your local visa office, check with the visa application center to make sure you have an idea of what the timeline is. Keeping in mind that these processing time guidelines may not be accurate during the pandemic. Next slide, please.
Okay, thank you, Chuling. So how to apply for your study permit. So these are the things that you're going to need in order to begin the process. The first one is a valid passport, which makes sense. For anybody to enter into another country, you're going to need a valid passport. The longer the validity of that, the better for your study permit, because the study permit will not be valid beyond the validity of your passport. The second thing that you will need is your letter of acceptance to Dalhousie. And so once you've made your application, Dalhousie will process your application and send you a letter of acceptance, and it will explain all sorts of details such as the cost of your courses and the program that you're in, if you're going to Halifax or the Truro campus and so on. and it's on Dal letterhead. It's can be 2 or 3 pages depending on the program that you're in. So you'll need that. The third thing that you will need is proof or a statement of adequate funds. So there's all sorts of things that you can use as proof of money or cash. You can have a bank account that has the money in that. You can also have a sponsoring agent or a scholarship guaranteeing the funds. Now, the proof of the money, the funds, is only for the first year of your study. That's what when they process your study permit application, they want to make sure you have enough money for the first year. That's the bare minimum. Third thing, as I mentioned, letter from your sponsoring agency. This may be your home school, or it might be somebody who's funding you a scholarship or a bursary. You will also need to have a study plan or a letter of explanation. And there are directions on the IRCC website on what to include. But basically, the study plan is to explain your study. Why are you coming to Canada? Why are you coming to Dalhousie? How does that fit into, if you are already studying in your home country, you will explain how coming to Dalhousie will help you to finish your program or extend your program. If you're a master's student, that's probably what would happen, is you would have a degree and then you were coming to Canada to do your master's. So your study plan will include all sorts of things along that line. Then, of course, there's $150 processing fee, and that must be submitted online. There are some other documents as well, but we're going to go over these in a little bit later slides. There's some other things. Each country may have some specifics. The ones that we've mentioned here are the ones that every student will need, but there are some documents from different countries that are also quite important, and those will come up in another slide. Next slide. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, if I may add something about the letter, the statement of purpose, whatever you call it. It's treated as a job cover letter. You know, if you were to apply for a job, right, you want to write a letter to impress your employer, right? So same thing with the visa office, with IRCC. You want to write a letter that's specific to your circumstances, to your plan, your goal, your future, right? So the last thing you want is to copy and paste and cut from Google, right? You know, saying Canada is a safe country, it's a beautiful country, and Halifax is a great city. You want to be talking about yourself, right? The officer wants to know more about you, your study, your future. So that's important, right? And as Mark indicated, every country, every region is different. Let's say if you're applying from Iran or from Azerbaijan, right? The visa office that processes your application may be in Ankara, Turkey, right? So make sure you look at the requirements for that Ankara office, what the specific documentation requirements in regards to proof of means of financial support or other documents, right? So that's really important. And this, like Mark indicated, is just a generic list, right? It's not an exhaustive list, but it's a list of things that everybody needs. So how to apply for study permit? So these days, especially during the global pandemic, online application is absolutely the preferred option, right? So don't apply on paper, apply online on the IRCC website. So you create an account for yourself. You know, either you choose the GC key option or the using your online banking option called the sign-in partner, whichever one you choose. And then you answer a few questions, and then it'll take you to an application checklist, whereby it'll ask you to upload your application form, your supporting documents, and maybe your optional documents as well, right? So once your application is approved, you will automatically be issued a visa if you're from a visa required country, or an ETA if you are from a visa exempt country. So in other words, you do not need to apply for the visa and the ETA separately, right? And then the last point is regarding students from the United States. US citizens or permanent residents are allowed to apply at the port of entry. So if US students fly into Canada, they can apply for their study permit at the airport. If they're driving through Canada, they can apply for their initial study permit at the land border crossing. And they are exempt from a visa, they're exempt from the ETA, and that they can apply at the port of entry. Students from other countries, unfortunately, you must apply from outside of Canada. So I'll hand over the next one to Mark. Thank you.
Thanks. Just one thing I want to mention, that we've used the word visa and ETA several times, and you might wonder, what is this? Why are they different? So visa is an actual stamp, or it's called a foil, but it's a stamp that is put into your passport, and it states that you have a visa, you have permission to come to Canada as a student, and it will have a date of that it was granted and a date of expiry and your name. So if your country requires you to have a visa stamp in your passport, one of the steps is to send your passport to have this placed in your passport. The ETA, electronic travel authorization, is exactly that. It's electronic. You don't see it. There's nothing in your passport. There's no stamp or marking. It's attached to your passport electronically. So when you are going through immigration into Canada and they scan your passport and the information's brought up, they will see your ETA. And so you might wonder, oh gosh, do I have an ETA? Well, yeah, you can check by going into your MyCIC account, but we'll get into that another time. So that's the difference between a visa and an ETA. Same thing, just a different format. So after you apply, what are some of the other things that you're going to need? One of them is your biometrics, which is your fingerprints and your photo. And you will have to actually go to, you'll have to provide these at a visa application center or at the embassy. It all depends on which country you are and where they collect this data. Excuse me. But they will, excuse me one second. So the biometrics, as I say, you'll have to provide those. And that is one of the biggest places where student applications for visas are slowing down, is giving the biometrics, because of maybe the visa centers are closed, or there's travel, there's restrictions in your home country. So just be patient. If you have received a letter to give your biometrics and you can't, don't worry. Your study permit application will not be refused because you can't give your biometrics. Your letter might state you have 30 days or 60 days, but don't worry about that. Just as long as once the visa application center is open, you can provide your biometrics. And the letter that you receive will explain how to do that. A couple of other requirements that many students is a medical exam. So once your study permit is processed, they may ask you for, or starting to be processed, they may ask you to do a medical exam, and that's by an authorized and recognized specific doctor in your home country or area. And then also the other thing is a police certificate. And that has to be from your home country or where you are living in the last 2 years or longer. And basically, they just want to see, do you have a criminal record? And if your record is clean, no need to worry. And hopefully that's the case. And for these two documents, this is one of the reasons, as Chu-Ling mentioned, to apply as soon as possible, because the biometrics or getting your medical exam or getting your police certificate, all of these can take sometimes months and months. It may seem simple, but this might hold up your application. So apply as soon as possible so that you can make application for one or all of these other documents. Next slide.
Great advice, Mark. Yeah, not every country has a visa application center or the biometrics collection service, and not every country has a the RSCC approved doctors, right? They call it the panel physicians or panel doctors. So if you're from a certain country, you have to travel to a regional center or another country. As you can imagine, during the pandemic, the travel restrictions and everything, right? That can be really complicated. So we could not be emphasizing that enough. It's to apply as soon as you can. So study permit approval. If your study permit application is approved, you will not get your permit right away. But instead, you get a letter. Maybe the letter may be in the format of an email, right? Email attachment. But it's commonly called a letter of introduction by the people working in the immigration business, right? It's a letter, but it's called a letter of introduction or introductory letter, or you could call it the study permit approval letter. It's the same thing, right? So this letter is really important. So you have to pack it with you, and don't pack it in your suitcase. Pack it with you in your, I don't know, bring it with you when you are at the airport. You have to present it to the officer. The officer wants to see the letter of introduction. You scan the barcode on the letter, and you bring your whole file out on the computer. They will see, okay, you have an ETA, visa, study permit approved, all the particulars, right, in regard to application. And so that's where at the port of entry, in most cases at the airport, right? In some cases, you know, in between Canada and US, it's the border crossing, the land crossings, right? Sometimes people may take ferries, right? At the ferry terminal, right? That depends on the port of entry. That's where you actually receive your study permit. And before you leave the immigration area, double check, look at your study permit to make sure the spelling of your name, your date of birth, your gender, the work authorization conditions, everything is correct. Everything is in there. Because the last thing you want is, oh, they made a mistake. Now I have to apply for an amendment or replacement copy. It'll take time. It'll cost you money. So, so keep in mind to bring this letter with you and then present it to the officer at the port of entry and double check before you leave the immigration area. Next slide. Okay, next slide I think is, okay, we'll hand it over to our colleague Zach to talk about the coming to Canada and the quarantine plan. Zach?
Thank you, Chu-Ling and Mark. So I will briefly share some high-level information regarding quarantine plan and travels. So once you have gathered all your documents and have your study permit, everything applied and approved, you're ready to come to Canada. And you might be wondering, when should I be booking my flight? What are the next steps? How do I let my school know that I'm coming during this time, especially during the global pandemic? how can we make sure everything goes smoothly? And this might be your first time travel internationally. We have already developed our website for you to reference. The first place you need to go is register online with our online survey. So I have already posted the link here on the slide. So in this survey, you will be sharing your flight information and your preference with your meals in the hotel and our personal information. Once we receive the survey, one of our support member will office peer support or myself, one of the advisors, might send you a quarantine template. This is very important to have a quarantine template filled with correct information. This allows you to be permitted to come into Canada, because then you will be considered as an essential traveler when you have a quarantine plan in place. Once International Center receives your quarantine plan, we will book a hotel room for you to quarantine and a taxi to pick you up from the Halifax airport to the hotel. However, before you can come to Halifax to quarantine, the latest update is that you have to quarantine for at least 3 days at the port of entry, which is 4 of the large airports: Vancouver, Toronto, Calgary, Montreal. So next slide, please. Yeah, so that's the mandatory hotel stopover quarantine. So this might add a little bit of hustle to your travels, but the process is actually quite straightforward. Before you leave your country, you'll have to book a 3-day hotel quarantine, hotel rooms online. There's a link for you to find out which hotels are the best for yourself to quarantine for 3 days. And during the 3 days of quarantine, you will receive a COVID-19 test. If your test result is negative, then you should be able to leave your stopover quarantine and get on a flight to Halifax and continue your remaining 11 days in quarantine. So your total length of quarantine is 14 days. That includes 3 days at the stopover airport and 11 days in Halifax. And we know things always change, flight might delay, there might be other health issues. During this time, if there's anything happened, you just have to send us an email and communicate to us so we can change your pickup from the Halifax airport to the hotel. Next slide, please. So here are some of the links for you to read. I would highly encourage you to follow our International Center Immigration COVID-19 update page. As we all know, in the pandemic, the policy changed really quickly. That might be a news coming up in the next couple months, and then change what you have already planned. Please follow these website and make your plans or change your plans accordingly. And for sure, International Center will also communicate with you when policy changes. And you can send us email, international.center@dalhousie.ca. If you are in Canada, you can also call that phone number. We would have someone to get back to you as soon as possible. Next slide, please. Now it's our question session. I'll give it back to Kristen.
Hi, thank you guys so much. It's all very valuable information. So we do have a couple of questions already in the Q&A section, and more are coming in as we speak. So let's dive right in. So one of our students here is asking, is there any preference that the Canadian government gives to TOEFL or IELTS exams for issuing visas? We'll pose that first one to you.
The question is TOEFL or IELTS, any preference, right?
Yeah.
That's for, I presume it's for immigration purposes. Yeah. For immigration purposes, I think IELTS is preferred. But mind you, for most study permit application streams, they don't necessarily require your English language test result. It's more for admission purposes, right? Admission to Dal, like my colleague Kristen's, office, registrar's office, international admissions team. They'll look at your TOEFL, your IELTS, your MELAT, your CAN test, or other acceptable forms of test, right? For immigration, for study permit application, as far as I know, only the study direct stream requires the IELTS academic 6.0. That's required. All the regular streams, they're not necessarily required. So the answer is, makes no difference, I guess, as long as you can satisfy the admission requirement, accepted to Dalhousie. But if you're applying under study direct stream, it's IELTS, it's not TOEFL. TOEFL is not acceptable.
And who's eligible for the direct stream?
Yeah, the study direct stream is not, unfortunately, it's not open to students from all over the world. It was only available to students from a select few countries, right? China, Vietnam, the Philippines, India, Pakistan, maybe 1 or 2 countries from Africa. So make sure you double check whether the stream is open to you and whether you have the IELTS 6.0. If you don't have it, you won't meet the requirement. So you might as well just apply to the regular streams.
So Julie is asking, provide the slideshow after the webinar. Yes, we will, Julie. We'll actually be sharing a recording of this session. So you'll have access to all the links that were shared and the information in the slideshow as well. And of course, you can follow up with us if there's any further questions. So Aiko is writing, what happens if my study permit doesn't get done in time for the start of my term because of a delay due to the pandemic? Mark, do you want to field this one?
Sure, I'll start this one. So there's many things that can happen. I guess it's unfortunate. It does happen. Dalhousie is planning to have face-to-face classes in the fall. It's that's our plan. It's not 100% cut in stone, but that's our plan. So if there is an option to do classes online, then you're okay. You can start your classes online while you're waiting for your study permit to be approved. If your classes are all face-to-face and you're not able to get to Canada due to the pandemic, then one option is to delay your start. If you really are not able to start your classes because they're all face-to-face, or your program requires that you be in Canada, then you may have to delay your start. And that's not usually a problem for most programs, to delay your start to, say, maybe for the winter semester. But I would, that specifics on that would have to come from either the registrar's office. You would have to let them know you want to delay your start. And I would also contact your program advisor to find out if you delay your start, what happens in that case. So those are some of the scenarios. Chuling, is there anything else another option?
I think you covered, pretty much all of it. I mean, you don't necessarily need a study permit or a study permit approval to begin your programs, right? But there is a risk, right? If in the event of a refusal, right? Then what do? You proceed with another, and then what if Dalhousie, like Mark mentioned, is open for in-person classes, right? Yeah, there's some risk involved. So it's your call. You have to determine what you want to do. Request a deferral from the registrar or from graduate studies, or take a risk, just continue and hoping for the best, right? Hoping that your study permit will be approved eventually. So that's what I would, add, I guess.
What I would recommend is if anybody is thinking that they might need to defer their start date, that you get in touch with either myself or one of my colleagues in international admissions, and then we can talk to you about what's available to your program, and we can always connect you to one of our immigration advisors here for advising there if you need it. Okay, so we have another question here. So Alexa is asking, do dual citizens who've never lived in Canada need a study permit?
That's a good question. Yeah, I hope I have the answer. If not, Mark, maybe you can jump in. I mean, if you are a dual citizen, right? Canadian, US, as long as you have proof of citizenship, right? You need to have the proof. You cannot say, my father is Canadian or my mother is Canadian, then I'm automatically a Canadian. It doesn't work that you have to have proof of citizenship, right? During the pandemic, I think you need a Canadian passport in order to travel to Canada without having to have a study permit. Normally, pre-pandemic, if you have any proof of citizenship, let's say you have the citizenship certificate or some other form of proof, you may be able to cross the border easily, right? During the COVID-19 pandemic, I think if you're a dual citizen, they want you to have a Canadian passport. Otherwise, you have to apply for a special authorization of some sort in order to travel to Canada without having to apply for a study permit. Or, you know what, or you may just have to apply for a study permit, right, if you want to come to Canada without any proof. Mark, do you have anything to add in that, or?
No, I think you're correct. You just need to have proof of your citizenship.
Very good. We've got lots of great questions coming in. So we have another anonymous one. I just had a question regarding the Commerce Co-op program. Do we have to apply for a work permit as well, being that we'll be working for a large portion of our time in Canada? And that's true also of many of our science programs and engineering as well.
Yeah, so I can tackle that one, and the answer is yes. But it is a work permit, but it's called an internship or a co-op work permit. And usually when you apply for your study permit, you will also apply for your co-op or internship work permit at the same time, so that they will be approved at the same time. So if you have a co-op in your program, your letter of acceptance to Dalhousie should clearly state that the co-op is a mandatory part of your program. And it doesn't, as long as it's less than 50% of the study time, then you should be able to apply for your study permit and your co-op work permit at the same time. The good thing is the co-op work permit is free. It doesn't cost anything. However, you do need to have that if you are going to be working in Canada, working during your study. So maybe I can just explain that a little bit better, or add to that. When you apply for a study permit, your study permit is also usually has written on it permission to work in Canada as a student. But there are restrictions. For example, when you are studying from September to December, you are a student. So you are allowed to work on and off campus as a student, but the number of hours off campus is limited to 20 hours per week. So there's a restriction. So if your co-op program is during that semester, that's why you need to have the co-op work permit, is because you will be working more than 20 hours a week. So you need permission to work while you're supposed to be a student, even if it's a part of your study program. So you're actually, in a way, breaking the rules, but the work permit, the co-op work permit, allows you to work more than the 20 hours because it's a part of your co-op. It's a part of your degree program. Chuling, anything you want to add to that?
Just quickly, you guys are all from, right at the moment, you guys are all from outside of Canada, right? The only way to apply for the co-op work permit is by applying at the same time as your study permit. There's no pathway for you to do this alone. So if you have already applied for the study permit, or your study permit application has already been approved, unfortunately, you cannot apply for the co-op work permit alone. So you have to wait until after you come to Canada to do that application. So if you haven't applied yet, apply at the same time, apply together.
One follow-up question maybe from me, for somebody who's starting in a program that has a co-op they apply to after their first year, like engineering, for example, would they apply for that from within Canada?
Yeah, if students haven't applied before they arrive, they will have to apply in Canada. It depends on the co-op office, right? Sometimes they want them to submit this application by a certain date in order for them to have access to the job postings and all those kind of things. So I would say most students apply for the co-op work permit while they are in Canada. The majority, I would say.
Yeah.
So we do have a question about fees here. So Taha is wondering what balance does she need to have in her bank account to apply? Should it be exactly the cost of the first year fees, or does it have to be more, less?
Mark, I think, talked about the proof of means of financial support, right? You don't need to show a huge balance, like millions of dollars, right? To cover your entire next 10 years in Canada. You don't have to, right? So as Mark indicated, you need to show proof that you can afford your first year of tuition and living expenses. I don't know what the amount, usually your tuition probably close to 30,000, let's say, and then your living expenses will be at least 10,000. So 40 to 50,000 Canadian dollars should be approximately your first year expenses, right? Tuition, living, international fees, living expenses, all combined. But it's more than just the balance you have to show. It's also the history. I mean, anybody can borrow a lot of money and deposit in their account to show a huge balance. If I were the officer, I want to know, okay, what is the source of this money? Is it through my parents' employment, through the business, through the investment? Is there a history of the savings, right? Is there like a 6 month of bank statement showing the balance, or there's only one balance statement, you know? So you have to follow the country and the region specific requirements in regards to the proof of financial support. And don't just show the balance, show everything, right? As much as you can, right?
That's so great. Great advice. Thank you so much. So what if the student is a minor, 17? Do they need a custodian to fill out the custodianship form?
Do you want to tackle that one, Chuling? I don't see that on my campus very often.
I can tackle this one. Sorry, Kristen, is it students over 17 or under 17?
It says that they are 17.
17, right? In Nova Scotia, if you're under 19, right, you're considered a minor. In some other provinces, you know, if you're under 18, you're considered a minor, right? Nova Scotia is 19, the age of majority. IRCC has updated their guidelines in regards to the custodianship or guardianship requirements. If you are over 17, but under 19, under the age of majority, but you're over 17, that requirement is discretionary. You know, it's no longer mandatory anymore, right? So what we typically recommend is you apply to live in residence for the first year. Because the reason being residence, there is a support network, right? There is the residence life manager, there's the residence assistants, there's the dining hall, there's a lot of support, right? So in a way, the residence community is like you have a custodian, right? So if you're over 17 but under 19, you apply to live in residence, you get a letter from residence, that should satisfy that requirement. As I said, it's discretionary, it's no longer mandatory. But if you're under 17, which is very rare that we admit someone who's under 17, right? It happens, but not very often. If you're under 17, it is absolutely required. And unfortunately, the university cannot act as your custodian. So you have to find a family or a friend who's a Canadian citizen or permanent resident in order to be your custodian.
So question, maybe you can answer. Is there a designated hotel in Toronto for the 3-day quarantine?
Yes, there are multiple hotels in these 4 airports that you can pick from for 3 days quarantine. From the Government of Canada website, you can search COVID-19 mandatory hotel stopover. There are links for choosing different hotels.
Lovely. So we have another question here. When are we supposed to apply for our study permits as an international student if we have received a conditional offer of acceptance? Should we apply for them as soon as we accept our offer, or do we need to wait for final transcripts to come and upload them? The student is from India and he's completing his 12th grade, and his final transcripts will be available in July.
Well, as we mentioned before, you should make your application as soon as possible. The final transcripts would be something that Dalhousie is looking for, not immigration. So that's a good question. Okay, so the conditional acceptance is from Dalhousie. I think you can probably complete your study permit process because you have the conditional acceptance. And yeah, so I guess the answer is to say yes. Continue on with your application for the study permit with the goal of coming to Canada. I guess the risk here is that if you don't do well, if you get your final transcripts and Dalhousie doesn't accept those, then I guess the thing is you're out the money for the application. But yeah.
Maybe I can jump in here.
Yeah, thanks.
On behalf. So every letter of admission that we send out, every single one of them has the condition that you complete your final year of study or whatever your final level of study is successfully. So if you have a letter that says that you have a condition that you submit your transcripts and that you successfully maintain the minimum average, I would definitely suggest that you apply for your study permit as soon as you get that or as soon as you're comfortable, because you're not going to get a different letter later. So that's going to be your official acceptance letter.
I mean, once you submit your application, it really depends on the officer, right? Immigration officer. Some officer may, issue a decision. Some may wait a little bit and requesting that you provide more information, in which case it might be the final transcript, right? So if you have to apply using the conditional offer letter, I would recommend writing a letter, include a personal letter, just indicating that, I'm doing well. Here's my midterm marks. I am expected to successfully pass the final exam. Once I receive the final transcript, if you request it, I will be happy to make an additional submission to, add to my application. So that's an option for you to do, right? Or if you want to wait, you wait until after you complete your grade 12, right? But given what's going on, it may be too late for you to apply it then, I guess.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add to this because this is a question we get a lot. If you've been admitted with the condition that you submit a language test like IELTS, TOEFL, Duolingo, whatever the case may be, we will not send another letter later saying that you're admitted without that condition. What we do is we send a second letter saying that you have met the language condition in your original letter of offer. So you would then have two letters that you would apply for your visa with. One saying that you were admitted with a language condition and a second letter saying that you've met that language condition.
Yeah, that's a good point. If that's the case, I guess once you receive the letter from the registrar, submit it to IRCC through the web form to add it to your application. The officer knows you have successfully met a condition, right?
All right, so we have a question here. How do I know if I need a police certification? I'm applying from a third country where PCC is not required, but my home country, which I am a citizen of, requires a PCC.
That's a good question. I mean, as we mentioned, these days you apply online, right? So once you create the account, you answer the questions, then application checklist will come up. So you will know whether this police certificate requirement is on the checklist or not. If it's not on the checklist, then I guess you don't have to provide it. But if you have already requested, I would include it, regardless whether they're asking for it. You can include it under optional documents, client information. If you have more than one police certificate, you can combine them, merge them into one PDF document, submit it under optional document. Yeah, but if it's not required, it's not on the checklist, it's up to you, but you don't have to provide it. But if you already have it, I would include it.
Zach, here's another question that you could potentially address. Does the quarantine in Halifax happen at a hotel chosen by Dalhousie, or can the student choose?
All the international students who came to Canada through international location, they need to quarantine in a government-approved hotel, which is the Westin Hotel in Halifax. Yes, it has to be appointed hotel, not any location that student might have chosen.
Mm-hmm. So this student's asking for some clarification. They think they heard us say that US students do not need to apply for a study permit in advance, and instead that they would apply at a point of entry. They just want to confirm that they heard that correctly, and they want to know, is it possible to apply in advance just to know that everything's in order?
So yes, you did hear correctly. You can apply at the port of entry when you're coming into Canada, but you should make sure you have all of the documents that prove that you are, that you meet the requirements and that you have a letter of invitation from Dalhousie, a letter of acceptance. And for the second question, you can, as an American student, a US student, you can apply online if you want. And then you don't have to worry about, if you're missing something at the border. I've had students who've done it both ways. I've had students who've been worried and have applied in advance. And I've had students who don't worry and just apply at the border.
Yeah, just a note of caution for the port of entry applications. Between Canada and the US, let's say between New Brunswick and Maine, there are several crossings, right? So if you cross make one cross, right? One crossing, and then if the officer said, no, you're coming to Canada too early, like 6 months ahead of the school start. And then does it come back later? And then if you leave this port of entry, you go to the next crossing. Don't do that, because it has happened before. The officer don't like that, so you might be in trouble if you do the shopping around, different crossings. Yeah, just stick to one border crossing. If they say no, just return and then come back later. Yeah, don't come to Canada too early, so they may deny entry, right? usually it's a month before school starts, or maybe a little bit longer, but definitely not like 6 months or a year ahead of time, right?
Really good advice there. So who can I contact regarding immigration or study permit questions?
You're looking at us. Chuling, myself, Mark, there's also Teresa Inacio, Zach as well. If you don't email all of us, but you can certainly email one of us or the International Center, and the International Center will get your question out to the one of the immigration advisors. If you're coming to the Truro campus, most likely I would help you with your questions, because I know the programs a little better on this campus, or Chuling, Teresa, or Zach in the Halifax, because they know their programs much better than I do.
Yeah, the International Center is absolutely your place for immigration support, immigration information and help. So we're here, just let us know, calling us, emailing us, or book an appointment. We'll be happy to provide support to you for sure.
So we have a question here. Is it necessary to get the COVID-19 vaccine to travel to Canada? Or is it an essential requirement to obtain a Canadian visa?
As far as I know, that's not required for immigration purposes. For travel, I'll let Zach, do you have any insight in terms of travel?
It is not required to have a vaccine. However, if you do have the vaccine, you will still have to quarantine for 14 days.
So we have a question here. Do you have to get a study permit every year of attendance?
So Mark, you gonna tackle that?
Okay, sure. I'll tackle that one. You can add in just in case I missed something. No, yes and no. If you are coming into a 4-year program, the immigration officer will evaluate your documents, and usually you will have a study permit for the full 4 years of study. If it's a master's program, then it may be for 2 years. If you're coming into, if you're doing ESL at the beginning as part of your program before you continue on with your degree, your study permit may only be for a year or for sometimes less. And and also, even if you're in a 4-year program, sometimes you don't always get a study permit for 4 years. You might ask, why is it, why would I say there's different lengths to the study permit? It's up to the discretion of the officer when they're looking at your application. And sometimes there doesn't seem to be any reason why they would not give you a study permit for 4 years. One example might be your passport isn't valid for 4 years, so they will only give you a study permit that has the same expiry date as your passport. And on that note, if you do get a study permit that is not for the full 4 years, it is usually not a problem to apply to extend your study permit in Canada. And you can do that at any time. The only time you should do it is before it expires. So you can do it when you arrive to extend it, or you can wait until it is close to expiring, and then you can apply to extend it and pay the fees again, of course.
Can I add something, Mark?
Sure.
I'm just speculating, right? Sometimes, like you mentioned, there's no reason why some people just get a 1 year, but they have to do it every single year. I'm guessing, if you have a 1 year study permit, of course, you have to apply for extension, right? You have to renew it. When you renew it, when you apply to extend it, it gives the officer an opportunity to look at your records in Canada to see whether you actually actively studying in Canada. Are you enrolled part-time? Are you enrolled full-time? If they request your transcript, are you a good student or are you not a good student, right? And that make a big difference in the officer's thinking and decision behind their processing, right? So just keep in mind, if you have a study permit with a very short validity, the onus is really on you to study hard, study actively, do really well academically. Because otherwise, when it comes to the extension or applying for a visa, you may not get it approved. So in which case you have to leave Canada. So that would be my take on that. Also a note of caution, right? Not warning, but some kind of reminder for future students.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for staying with us. We're now just past 8 o'clock, so I think we'll end our session here. There are some questions that got asked that we haven't had time to answer. But if you guys do want to follow up with us, feel free to please send us an email. We're more than happy to get in touch with you guys. I've posted my email in our chat function, kristen.fraser@dal.ca. It's also here above my shoulder in my my view. So if you guys want to follow up with me, I'm more than happy to share any immigration questions that you have with our advisors here, and we'll get back to you with some guidance. Any last remarks from our wonderful panelists?
Thank you very much, Kristen, for organizing the event and for inviting us. Yeah, and thank you for all the participants. Yeah, we're really happy to talk to you, answer your questions. So look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah, same here. And thank you to our translators. I could see you were busy. It seemed like you were busy. So thank you very much for your work.
Yes, thank you all. Everybody have a great night.